Excuse me, good afternoon. Ms. Burnett, what do they study? What class is this?
This is, for language arts, we just read 12 Angry Men.
Oh, excellent, okay. So that's a work of fiction about a jury, though, and it's, so you got a little bit of an idea about how a jury decides a case, right? And isn't that a case, a story where the jury's lopsided one way and they eventually make their way?
There's a lot of prejudice on the jury.
All right. Well, the juries I've seen work have not really been driven by prejudice or bias too much, but those are natural things for human beings to deal with, and they sometimes enter the jury deliberation room, as you read about in that play. Let me ask this: how much time do we have?
We have till 2.
Till 2, so about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
All right. Let me talk a little bit about who I am, what I do, and then a little bit of a different aspect of jury trial process. Jury trial process, by the way, is one of the most important foundations and components of our system of government. What it demonstrates, I think, better than anything else, even better than elections, is that in the United States of America, we leave the most important governmental decisions to the people. The people decide. The people make up their minds together in a collective way about important things. Even when you vote and you pick a representative in the government, in the Congress, or the president, or the governor, or in the state legislature, you're only picking a representative. It's very important, and that representative exercises his or her judgment on your behalf as a citizen and makes policy. But when you're on a jury, you're not just making policy, you're actually deciding what happens. You're deciding what facts took place and which side prevails and which side doesn't. And we'll do a little jury selection exercise at the end of this. Not that probably spend most of our time doing jury selection. Now, I'm sure most of you, or at least some of you, have studied in social studies or history or whatever, in American history, our system of government in America. We have a system that's called federalism, right? There's 2 systems of government that actually more than 2, but 2 main systems of government that you all live under. What towns are covered by the Timberlane School District? Plastow, right? What else? That's not going to work.
Plastow, Atkinson, Danville, Sandown.
Okay, so 4? All right. So when you live in one of those 4 towns, you live under town government. Both those towns are all small towns. They have direct democracy. They have town meeting. They elect selectmen. Some do, some don't. We also are all citizens of the state of New Hampshire. And we're also all citizens of the United States of America. That system of federalism is the system whereby, as citizens, we are all governed by more than one government. The federal government makes rules that cover the entire United States of America. All 50 states, plus our territories. Places like Guam, Puerto Rico, certain extraterritorial outposts that live under U.S. law. There's also states. 50 states, as you know, ours is New Hampshire. The government of New Hampshire, which is one government that regulates your life, has rules, regulations, prohibitions that affect you. That's the state government. You're a member of that political subdivision of the United States. The United States has rules, laws, regulations that also govern your life. Every aspect of life, really. And when you live under both, and when they work together, that's called federalism. The interesting thing, New Hampshire is one of the oldest states, and it was formed as a state pretty close to the same time the country was formed as a nation. And that's not a coincidence. That's why they both basically, the state of New Hampshire and the United States, have roughly the same system of government. Some of the newer states, especially out west, have a little bit different form of government than the United States. But New Hampshire's is very similar. It's got 3 components, right? Have you heard anything in your studies about the separation of powers? Is that a new term? Separation of powers? There's 3 components to our government. Our governments do 3 things. They're called the legislative, the executive and the judicial. And they both exist really in identical form at the state level, New Hampshire, and the federal, national level, the United States. First of all is the legislative branch. The legislative branch is the body that has elected representatives that makes laws, okay? There are about 335 representatives in the United States Congress, elected from all the states, different parts of the state. In New Hampshire, we have 2 districts. We elect 2 representatives to the Congress and 2 United States senators. Every state has 2 senators and some number of representatives. Vermont only has 1. Wyoming only has 1. New Hampshire has 2. That's the legislative branch. They make the laws. They vote on laws. Once they're voted on and signed by the president, they become law. The president is a separate branch of government. We've done legislative. The president is the executive. The executive branch of the government is the one that enforces the law, actually runs the different bodies of government, runs the police department, right? Runs the Department of Health and Human Services, runs all kinds of the Department of Education, right? That governs, that sets educational policy in the United States, all right? That's the executive branch. Agencies appointed by the president, government officials appointed by the president, that run and enforce the government. That's 2. Legislative, the Congress that makes the law. Executive, the governor or president, I should say president because we're talking about the USA, that enforces the law. And then the 3rd branch of government, which is what we're going to talk about today, the judicial branch. Judicial sounds like judge, that's what it is, it's made of judges. In the United States, we have the United States Supreme Court. 9 judges that they don't make the law, but they don't enforce the law. What they do is they interpret the law. They say what the law means when people disagree about what the law really means. Now, and they also resolve disputes. When people, they don't just decide what laws mean, but other than the judicial branch, the judicial branch also decides what happens when there's a dispute. Who is correct, who is incorrect, which side actually is right about the truth of what actually happened. And that decision is not left to the judges. The judges are on the Supreme Court, and there's other judges like myself in the United States system that are lower, all right? But we don't decide what happened when there's a conflict, a crime, or a lawsuit between 2 parties. That's left to the people. We pick a jury, we put the evidence in front of the jury in what's called a trial, right? And the jury decides who wins, who loses, and what happened. It's one of the most important decisions a government can make. Because when people disagree, whether it's 2 people who are in a lawsuit together, or 2 businesses, or even the police and a criminal defendant, if they can't agree, there's really only 2 ways things will get resolved. One is by violence, right? One party will just impose power over the other and prevail. And we've rejected that as a society in the United States. We have a judicial system where we bring it to court and it's decided by a judge and jury, most importantly a jury. All right? Now, that's the way the federal government works, the United States government. Legislative branch is the U.S. Congress that makes the law. The President of the United States and all of his agencies, that's the executive branch that enforces the law. And then the judiciary, the United States Supreme Court, that interprets the law and resolves the disputes. I'm a member of that 3rd branch. My name, I should have introduced myself, and I apologize. Ms. Burnett introduced me. My name is Laplante, Joe Laplante. I live in Nashua. I work in Concord because that's where the federal court for New Hampshire is, in Concord. I'm not on the Supreme Court of the United States. There are lower courts. There are what are called district courts. Each district, which is a name for a state or a smaller part of the state, has a court. Ours is in Concord. It's the United States District Court for the District of New Hampshire. That's where I sit. There's 3 of us judges sitting there. There's also 2 more retired judges who sit there, because after you retire as a judge, if you want, you can keep working if you want to, and some of them do. So there's 3 of us there, plus 2 retired ones that sometimes work with us. And we conduct trials every day. Now, there's also a state system that we live under. And in New Hampshire, it's set up pretty much exactly like the United States government under the Constitution. These rules are set up, of course, by the way, in a Constitution. The United States of America has a Constitution, as you know, that sets up those three parts of government. It's the first three articles in the Constitution. Article 1, the Congress. Article 2, the President. Article 3, the Supreme Court. New Hampshire, the same way. We have a state legislature, a House and a Senate, exactly the same. Plastow, Sanborn, Danville, Atkinson, all have representatives in that legislative branch. Then there's a executive branch, like the president, but at the state level, at New Hampshire level. What's that called? The governor, exactly right. Governor right now is Governor Maggie Hassan, right? She recently declared, a couple days ago actually, that she wants to leave the state government and try to join the federal government. In the state government, she's in that executive branch. She's like, well, she is the governor. She enforces the law. She wants to run for the federal government, the U.S. government, in the legislative branch. She's going to run for Senate, United States Senate. So there's the governor, executive branch, the legislature, that's the legislative branch, and of course there is a judicial branch at the state level as well, the New Hampshire Supreme Court. There's not 9 judges on the New Hampshire Supreme Court, there's only 5. Much smaller, we're a much smaller community than the U.S., so we have smaller government. All right, now let's put aside the legislative branch, put aside the executive branch for now, and just talk about what I do and what you've been reading about in 12 Angry Men. By the way, you notice it's kind of an older play. It's 12 Angry Men, right? Where's the women? They weren't on that jury, were they? Well, I'll tell you, the juries I picked tend to be more women than men. It just tends to work out that way. I think it's because the lawyers that pick the jury, I think they just think, don't get upset at me, I think they just think women make better jurors for some reason. For whatever reason. They might think it's just better for their particular case. But the lawyers help pick the jury, as you two are going to do today, when we pick a jury. Now, there's 2 types of cases that are handled in the judicial branch. There's actually lots of things that go on in the judicial branch. We swear in new citizens to the United States, do a number of things, but our main job, the job that's in the Constitution, is to interpret the law and run court, decide cases. 2 types of cases, civil and criminal. Cases are disputes, disagreements between 2 parties usually. There's a difference between a civil case and a criminal case. The one you're probably more familiar with, or not so much more familiar, but you're more familiar. You're more accustomed to seeing it on TV, movies, internet, everything else, are criminal cases. A criminal case is a dispute between usually the government, either the state at the state level or the United States at the federal level, and a criminal defendant or group of defendants. It's when a defendant is charged with a crime. That's the dispute. There's an accusation made, usually by law enforcement like the police, or at the federal level like the FBI, the DEA, or one of those law enforcement agencies, the ATF, there's a number of them, and a person. And that's a dispute. The case is, Kate, what's your name? Jake what?
Murphy.
So it would be United States versus Jake Murphy, okay? That would be the case if Jake Murphy were accused of a crime. That case gets decided in court. The FBI doesn't get to say Jake Murphy's guilty. It doesn't work that way. In our system, it's got to be proven in court, proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And the way that's done, unless Jake Murphy admits the crime, called a guilty plea, which happens a lot but not every time, there's a trial. And that decision, that crucially important decision about whether the accusation against Jake is true or not, and whether Jake should be punished, is decided by the people. 12 people chosen pretty much at random through a system that we're going to execute today together to form a jury. When 12 people have to agree on something, that something's been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, it's pretty good bet that it happened. And when you prove it to 12 people, if it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt, pretty good bet that nothing's 100% foolproof in life, unless you've got a videotape and a confession, right? But if you don't have that, someone's got to hear the evidence and make up their minds, and that's the jury. That's a criminal case. There's state crimes. There are state crimes like robbery, driving while intoxicated, theft, murder, sexual assault, domestic violence. The list goes on and on. Many, many, many state crimes. Some serious, some not as serious. Some like, fishing without a license. You're not going to go to prison, but it's on the books as a violation of the law. All right? Federal crimes are some similar, some different. Drug offenses, weapons offenses, immigration offenses, entering the country illegally, white-collar theft and fraud, bank fraud, all kinds of frauds. Those tend to be in federal court, the court where I sit. Now, that's criminal cases. The other type of cases are called civil cases, criminal and civil. Anybody know what a civil case is? Who thinks they know what a civil case is? Lots.
And lawsuits and stuff.
Lawsuits and stuff, exactly right. Now, half of them are going, well, what's that, right? Lawsuits and stuff. A lawsuit is not when the government accuses Jake Murphy of a crime. Okay? A lawsuit and stuff is when one person sues another person, or one person sues a company, or one company sues another company, or one company sues a person, or one person sues the government for something. Now, what's your name?
Ben Swanee.
Ben. And what's your name? William? William. So if Ben sues William, it's Ben versus William in court. You could accuse him of anything. A breach of contract. We had an agreement, and the other side didn't live up to the agreement. Ben hired William to plow his driveway, shovel his driveway, right? You're not driving yet, right, Will? Right? Shovel his driveway all winter. And then for $10 a storm or whatever, William didn't show up. William said, I want to get paid anyway. He might sue him in court and say, no, not only do I want to not pay you, I want all my money back. I hired you for the whole winter. You didn't show up. A breach of contract. An agreement that one side says was broken or breached. Or maybe when these guys are driving someday, they'll have a collision in downtown Plastow, right? Who's at fault? Who has to pay for the damages to the other's vehicle? Or, heaven forbid, if William winds up in a hospital with medical injuries, who pays his medical bills? It depends who's at fault for the accident. That's lawsuits and stuff. That's civil law. And just like criminal law, that very important decision about how a dispute is resolved, who wins, who loses, and what actually happened is left to the people. That's our constitutional system of judicial government. Important decisions are left to the people. Now, when the people make those decisions, they're not just left to their own devices. The judge is there in every case to tell them what the law is. Tell them what the law is about an automobile accident and the rules of the road. Or tell them what the law is about contracts and agreements and what must be proven to win a lawsuit and recover damages in court. But that's what I want you to think about when you think about what happens in court. Criminal cases between the government and a person. Government usually represented by the police or law enforcement and a person. Civil lawsuits are disputes between any two people over a disagreement about an event, an agreement, some set of circumstances where one party believes it's got a right to recover damages, money, from the other, generally money. So that's a little crash course in two things, okay? In two things. One is the separation of powers, our system of government, in a federalist system of government, the United States and New Hampshire each having three branches: legislative, making the law; executive, enforcing the law; and judicial, interpreting the law and resolving disputes. It happens at the state level in New Hampshire and the federal level in the United States in our system of federalism. It's a very complex system of how the laws work together. One of the places laws work together every day in a very complicated, complex, and important way is right in this building. All right? The state of New Hampshire runs the school, imposes educational law in New Hampshire. It's done at the local level by the Timberlane School District. But there's a whole lot of federal law that applies to what happens here. How does it apply? Well, there's lots of money available. And some of that money will flow to the district if education is conducted in the way the federal government wants it conducted. And believe me, there's a lot of teachers in this room and school administrators right now nodding their heads or shaking their heads because they know what I'm talking about, right? It is a very complex system that teachers, educators have to deal with every day. You're on sort of the receiving end of it, but a whole lot of people are always slicing, dicing, working out how federal law, state law, local school district law, policy are going to work together to educate all of you. It takes a lot of work, but it's all about laws. And when there's a disagreement about a number of things, those disagreements can get resolved in a court like the one where I sit. So there's your crash course on separation of powers, federalism, and then what happens in court, civil laws, and criminal laws. What's the judge do? You're going to be the jury today, or at least a number of you are. All right? What's the judge do? The judge in court tends to act a little bit like the referee, making sure the rules of the dispute are enforced and followed by everybody on the field or in the courtroom. Making sure it's fair, making sure the rules apply to both sides evenly, and making sure everybody's on notice of the rules. It's much like refereeing. But the judge isn't in a jury trial deciding who wins. The jury decides who prevails in a jury trial. Now, one of the things we do, the first thing we have to do in a jury trial is pick a jury. And that's what we're going to do today. You just read a fictional account in 12 Angry Men of jury deliberations. I mean, the play literally starts with deliberations, right?
Right.
It's been a long time for me, but I think I remember. Before they got to deliberate, they had to be picked. And that picking a jury is a lengthy process, especially in a murder case. In a murder case, sometimes jury selection can take a week. Sometimes it can take 2 weeks. If it's not a murder case, it's more of a routine case involving property or less serious kind of murder. Usually a jury can be selected in a couple of hours, believe it or not. But in a murder case that's where somebody's life's at stake, maybe life imprisonment, a great length of time is utilized in picking a jury. Now, when we're in court in a criminal case, there's two sides. It's the United States versus a criminal defendant. In this case, I guess Ms. Bennett picked a couple lawyers for us, right?
We did.
Is that right? See here. One of you, you're Jen, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your name? Can't read my own writing.
Ben.
Jen and Ben. Okay. Who's the prosecutor? Jen's the prosecutor. Jen will represent the United States of America, okay, in this case. Ben will represent the defendant in this case, Anthony Harris. Anthony Harris is Ben's client. It's his job to zealously work hard and represent him in court in front of the jury, make sure he gets a fair trial, and tries to win him what's called an acquittal. An acquittal is the word for a not guilty verdict. Jen's looking for a conviction, which is the word for a guilty verdict. But before they get to that part, before they get to prove their case, they got to pick the jury. And that's what we're going to do today. We run a process called jury selection. The idea is to select 12 qualified jurors. What's it mean to be qualified? Well, let's get down to it. Not everybody is qualified to be a juror. Because to be qualified, you have to have certain characteristics The most important one of those is that you have to be fair and impartial. Who knows what impartial means? Anybody? Who knows what impartial means? Anybody? You in the back of the corner.
Not favoring the side.
Exactly right, not favoring either side. You gotta have an open mind and be willing to give both sides your full attention and consideration and not lean on one side, lean toward one side or another. Now, the two lawyers are going to participate in the process and help me question some of the jurors to see if they are qualified. This is exactly how we proceed if this was a real trial. What it involves is me telling you some things. You're what's called the jury veneer. The jury veneer is the panel of people who've been brought in to the courthouse on a day of jury selection. From all of you, we reduce it down to 12. How did you get here, by the way? How did all of you get called to court? From two sources. Motor vehicle registration and voting. Voting records. If you're registered, not voting, but if you're registered to vote and you're a licensed driver, you are on the list of people who get to be called for jury duty. Jury duty is not a big sacrifice. If you're ever called for it, you ought to participate. It's a very important part of our government, and it's really your obligation. It's really your obligation to do it, because everybody's entitled to a fair and impartial jury, and if that's what, and you need to participate in that process as an American citizen. First of all, you'd be sworn in by the clerk of the court. You'd swear to do your best to be fair and impartial. Then I, as the judge, would explain this to you. This is a criminal case. The grand jury has returned an indictment. That's a different jury that just charges crimes, doesn't decide. Grand jury has returned an indictment against Anthony Harris containing 3 counts, charging him with 1, robbery in violation of federal law, 2, use of a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence, and 3rd, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. And 4th, I misspoke, it's not 3 crimes, it's 4. 4 is transporting a stolen motor vehicle. Those are the 4 crimes Anthony Harris is charged with. The indictment states that on September 16th of 2015, Anthony Harris unlawfully, willfully, and knowingly robbed a Cumberland Farms convenience store in Plastown, New Hampshire, by means of force, violence, and fear of injury, taking money from a Cumberland Farms employee against that employee's will. The indictment further states that during and in relation to a crime of violence, that is the Cumberland Farms robbery, Anthony Harris knowingly, intentionally, and unlawfully used, carried, and brandished 2 firearms, a Beretta pistol and a Smith & Wesson pistol. 3rd, that Anthony Harris knowingly and intentionally possessed a firearm after having previously been convicted of a felony. Before this case, previously being convicted of a felony. And finally, that Anthony Harris knowingly transported in interstate commerce a Ford pickup truck, knowing that the truck had been stolen. Those are the charges against Anthony Harris, represented today by Ben, prosecuted today by Jen. All defendants in criminal cases, and this is very important, you need to listen carefully now, all defendants in criminal cases are presumed to be innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The indictment, the charges, are merely a formal way of accusing a person of a crime in order to bring that person to court and to trial. However, the indictment does not constitute any evidence. The charges are not evidence in any way of the guilt of any defendant, including Anthony Harris. You should not draw any inference from the fact that an indictment has been returned against Anthony Harris. First, I want to begin by thanking you for your service and acknowledge that jury service can be a sacrifice that you make as a citizen when you are called to come here. We know that you're busy people. We know that you have families. We know that you have jobs. And we know that you have lives. Jury service infringes on your life in a small way for a short period of time. We understand this and appreciate the sacrifice that you make. One of the constitutional rights that we all enjoy is a right to a trial by jury. And the system really wouldn't work, wouldn't function at all, without people like you who are willing once or twice, maybe once, twice, 3 times in their entire lifetime, to come in and spend just a few days of your life working with us here in court. It is a sacrifice, jury service, but also one I think you will find extremely rewarding. The bottom line in all this is that you are serving your country by being here today. Although you do not have to wear a uniform or get shipped overseas or risk your life in military service when you serve on a jury, if you are selected to sit on this jury, you are performing a very real service in the United States of America. Now we'll get started. We're going to start by asking counsel for the government, the prosecutor, to introduce herself. Please stand and introduce yourself to the jury veneer.
Hi, I'm Jen Hughes.
Thank you. Defense counsel?
Hi, I'm Ben Richmond.
Now, the first part of a trial is jury selection. During that selection, we do a number of things, mostly exchanging information between yourselves and the court. We're going to exchange that generally in front of each other publicly. In a real jury selection, we might do a few things quietly over on the side of the bench, personal things, but today things won't get that personal because this is a learning exercise, so we'll be doing it all out loud. The way most of it's actually done in court, 90% of it is out loud. Now, what we're trying to do through this exercise, called the voir dire process, voir dire, French words, V-O-I-R-D-I-R-E, voir dire. We are trying to determine whether you are qualified to be a juror. To be qualified, only 3 things are required. First, that you can be here in court on the days of the trial, which means today and maybe a few more days. Second, that you can see and hear the evidence as it's presented. You have to have sufficient faculties in terms of vision and hearing to see and hear the evidence and evaluate. If you're hard of hearing or have vision problems, sometimes we can aid you, but there's got to be a minimal amount of ability to see and hear the evidence in order to participate in this particular function of serving as a juror. And finally, and this is the important one, that you can be a fair and impartial juror in observing the evidence and rendering a just verdict. Now, Ms. Burnett, is Ms. Burnett still here?
I am.
If we can get the lights turned down just a little bit, it would be good.
Oh, sure.
Because I can't see anybody right now. And I need to see them a little bit to conduct this. You don't have to turn them off, although you can. Whatever works. That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. Now, the purpose of this voir dire examination is the following. It's really just a series of questions. It's for each juror, each of you, to examine your own mind and your own conscience to determine if you can sit on this case and be fair and impartial. That's a little too dark. There you go. Second, to enable me, the court, to determine whether or not any of you should be excused for cause. Being excused for cause means for some legal reason that you cannot serve. Third, to enable counsel for the parties, Jen and Ben, to exercise their individual judgment with respect to what are called challenges. Challenges mean knocking you off the jury if you are not qualified for some reason. Now I'm going to ask you a series of questions. There are 22 questions. What I want you to do is think about the questions carefully. If your answer to any question is yes, all you need to do is make a note of the question number on your pad or your paper. Just a number. You don't have to write out the whole question or try to remember it. But if it was question number 4, and I'll tell you all the numbers, just write a 4. Only write a number if you have a yes answer to the question. All right? Only write the number if you have a yes answer.
Judge Laplante, they actually have a sheet that has 1 through 22,
Oh.
so they're just going to write yes or no on the other number.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
But the way this works, if you have 1 through 22, trying to write all your answers out probably not going to work. What you want to do is circle anyone that you'd say yes to, and maybe write a word or two yourself. Okay? Trying to write all the answers out won't work. Because what I'm going to ask you later, if you're chosen, if your number's chosen, I'm going to ask you if you have any yes answers. Now, later, once we're done asking the questions, I'm going to draw numbers randomly. I just have a little app on my phone. There's 317 of them.
Yes.
It'll draw numbers between 1 and 317. And if your numbers come up, we'll ask you a couple of questions. And Ben and Jen may have questions for you to determine if they think you are a suitable juror. Everybody understand? Any questions before we start? I don't mean questions about background, just questions about this process. All right, here we go. Question number 1. This case is expected to take 2 days to try. It should be completed by midday on Monday, to get the weekend off. Does this present any special problem to any member of the jury panel? That's question number 1. Question number 2. Do you know either of the lawyers involved in this case? Have you had any personal or business relationships with them? Or have you been represented by them or members of their law firms in the past? Question number 3. Are you related by blood or marriage to the defendant, Anthony Harris? Do you know Anthony Harris? Or do you or any member of your immediate family have any personal or other relationship with Anthony Harris? 4. Do you know the prosecutor, Jen, or any of her associates in her office? 5. Are you employed by, or do you employ, any party in this case? Mr. Harris or the government? With respect to the U.S. government, do any of you or any of your immediate family work for the United States government at the present time, as Jen does? Or do you or any of you have, or any of your immediate families work for the United States government at any time, except for military service? Military service doesn't count. 6, have you had, do you have, or do you anticipate having any sort of case or dispute against the U.S. government? 7, at this point we would read a witness list. A list of the witnesses that are going to be called. And it would be John Jones, Fred Brown, Betty Anderson, on and on. If you knew any of the people, you'd have to write it down right now. We don't have any witnesses right now, but that's what we would do on question 7. Question 8. Have you or any member of your family or any close friend ever been employed by or done volunteer work for any law enforcement agency? By law enforcement agency, I mean things like Plastow Police, Atkinson Police, New Hampshire State Police, FBI, DEA, etc. Number 9. Have you ever served as a juror in a criminal or civil case before this case? Number 10. Have you at any time been involved in a criminal matter in any court that involved you personally or any member of your immediate family, either as a defendant, as a witness, or as a victim? Number 11. Taking into account who the parties are in this case, and the subject matter of the case. Who the parties are: U.S. government, Anthony Harris, and the subject matter: armed robbery, Cumberland Farms and Plastow; firearm, stolen truck. Is it possible that you have already decided what the verdict should be in this case? Or do you have any bias or prejudice that might affect your verdicts? And this is important. By bias or prejudice, I'm not speaking only of matters like race or ethnicity or religion or sexual orientation, any of that. By bias or prejudice, what I mean is any preconceived notion about any issue involved in the case, favorable or unfavorable, that might affect your ability to be fair and impartial in returning your verdicts. 12, have you directly or indirectly given an opinion or formed an opinion already about the case? 13, do you know anything about the case, or have you advised or assisted in its investigation? or its preparation for trial, either by the prosecution or the defense. 14. 14. Do you have any special disability or problem that would make it difficult, impossible, or physically uncomfortable for you to serve as a member of the jury? 15. Here's an important one. Do you believe that because the defendant has been charged with a crime, that he's probably guilty and therefore must present evidence to prove that he is innocent? Number 16, also important. If you have that kind of belief, would that belief prevent you from accepting from this court, from the judge, and applying to this case the correct formulation of the law? That is, that a defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty, and that the prosecution, that's Jen, has the burden of proving the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and that the defendant, represented by Ben, need not produce any evidence whatsoever in the case. 17. Do any of you hold the belief that because a witness is employed by law enforcement at a local, state, or federal level, that the testimony of such a witness is more worthy of belief than that of a witness not employed by law enforcement? 18. Are you related to or acquainted with any law enforcement agents in this case? If so, I want to strike that. I asked it wrong. Are you related to or acquainted with any law enforcement agents? Period. Not this case. Will the fact that you are related to or acquainted with a law enforcement agent or officer cause you to give greater or lesser weight to the testimony of law enforcement officials or agents than you would to other people who are not members of law enforcement? 19. 19 is repetitious. I'm not going to do it. 20. Have you read anything in the newspaper about this case? Have you heard anything on the radio? Or have you seen anything on television or the internet about this case? 21. Do you know of any good or sufficient reason why you cannot sit and hear the evidence in this case and render a true and honest verdict under your oath, according to the facts as you find them to be, in the law, as this court will give it to you? And finally, 22. Do you know of any other reason why you cannot serve on this case? So you've heard all 22. What will happen now is this. Be quiet in the court. I'm going to pick numbers randomly. If your number's called, you'll stand. I'll call on you. I'll ask you what questions you had a yes answer to. And we'll talk about it together. If Ben or Jen have any questions for you, they'll follow up. And then I'll make a decision about whether you are qualified to be on the jury. If you're qualified, you, in an orderly way, come up the stairs and take your seat in the jury box. Everybody understand? All right. Here we go. Be quiet, please. Juror number 185. 185. Is there a 185? All right. 166. Please stand. Hi, what's your name? Alexis, did you have any yes answers? No yes answers, really? Now, these two people may know you, they may not. Do you have any questions for Alexis?
No.
Any questions for Alexis?
No.
You're qualified. Come on up. Take your place in the jury box. By the way, I need quiet in the court. By the way, that happens all the time. The system relies on the honesty of the jurors. And if they don't have any yes answers, they don't. I'll say this, though. In court, the lawyers would have read questionnaires filled out by each juror before court. And they may have follow-up questions based on the questionnaires. What they do for a living, how they feel about certain things. Alexis is juror number 1. All right. Back to the... Hey, Jake Murphy, come on up here. Jake's going to run my app for me so I'm not playing my phone all day. Come on, Jake, let's hustle. Quiet, please. Just hit where it says generate and tell me the number. What is it?
295.
295. Juror number 295. Your name? Elizabeth. Elizabeth, do you have any yes answers? What number?
2.
Number 2. You know the lawyers?
Yep.
Both of them?
Yep.
Okay. Are you friendlier with one than the other?
Yes.
Which one?
Jen?
Jen?
Yes.
All right. You guys are in some classes together?
No.
No. Have you played any team sport?
No.
You ever slept over her house?
No.
Have you ever been to her house?
No.
Sounds like a really close friendship. How do you know Jen?
Oh no, we're like
School friends. Okay. You also know Ben?
Yeah.
All right. You get along okay with Ben?
Yeah.
Do you think you can give both sides of them a fair trial?
Yeah.
You think you might, you said you know you're more friendly with Jen than you are with Ben. Do you think you might be inclined to lean toward Jen's side of the case just because you know her a little bit better or you like her, you're closer?
No.
No. Ben, do you want to follow up?
No.
You good? Well, she told me she can be objective. She told me she can be fair. She struck me as sincere and honest. I'm going to rule that you're qualified. Ready? Quiet, please. 158. 158. Order, please. Sounds like your name is Dale. Dale, do you have any yes answers? What number?
Number 2 and 4.
Okay. So you also know, is it Ben, Jen, or both? Ben. This is probably going to happen a lot, right? We're in middle school here, right? Okay. Ben, so you know Ben. You don't know Jen? Okay. Do you and Ben hang out?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Do you hang out at school or out of school? Just school? Okay. No sleepover stuff, nothing like that? Nothing, you don't play any teams together? All right. Do you have any classes together?
Yes.
Okay. How many?
3.
All right. What's your opinion of Ben?
He's a great round kid.
A great kid? Okay. Jen, you may be getting worried now.
Yeah.
Do you think you can be fair and impartial, or would you tend to favor Ben?
I would tend to favor that.
You would. Dale is not qualified. Now look, let me just make one point. This is an exercise to determine how juries are selected. That may be exactly what Dale wanted right there. I don't know. Dale might not want to be up here, but I am going to ask you all to be honest. All right? Give me honest answers. 270. And Dale, I'm not saying you weren't being honest. I don't know. 270. All right. Quiet, please. Your name, sir? Riley? Okay, Riley. Do you have any yes answers? What number? 1? 4. You know the prosecutor? You know Jen? Okay. How do you know Jen? Just school? Have any classes together? No. Oh, somebody says you have social studies. All right. Now, do you know Ben? A little bit? Do you know one of them better than the other? Who? Jen. Do you think you favored Jen in this trial because you know her better than Ben? You would. So you might decide the case based on the relationship, a little bit better knowledge of Jen than Ben. Favor her side of the case? Think so? All right, not qualified. 279. You gotta have, you need a little maturity level, a little bit, right? You can have an uproar every time we choose a juror. Name? Christian. Christian, do you have any yes answers? Is it Christopher or Christian? Christian. Yeah. So you know one or both of them? Just Ben. Can you be fair between them? Yeah. Yeah? You sound like you're not sure. Why do you hesitate? Okay, you don't know either of them that much. So you know Ben, but not really that much. Would you be inclined to kind of favor his side just because you know him a little bit? All right. Do you have any other yes answers? No. None. Okay. You don't know anybody in law enforcement? No. All right. You haven't made up your mind about the case ahead of time? All right. Jen, any follow-up questions for Kristen?
How, like,
Well, in court, when lawyers speak, they stand.
how well do you know Ben? Because I have Jim with you, and I think that's it. And we haven't really had a single conversation, but you seem to
So
know
much that when
Ben.
I asked if you knew Jen, you said no. Any follow-up? Follow-up?
No.
Ben, any questions for Christian? None? Christian's qualified. Yes! What we're gonna do? Seems like you guys are a little wound up, so here's what I'll do. I realize you're gonna kind of talk, but when I hold the hand up, then be quiet, right? Then we'll get through it. Okay. What do you got, Jake? 114. 114. What's your name? Kaylee. Kaylee, do you have any yes answers besides number 2?
Yeah.
What?
4.
Number 4. Yeah, this is the same one. You know her.
Yeah.
All right. Besides that,
No.
same thing then. How, do you know both of them or one of them? Both. Okay. You know one better than the other.
Yeah.
Which one?
Jen.
Jen? Okay. You gonna favor Jen over Ben?
No.
You sure? Okay. Any questions, Ben? You sure? Jen?
No.
You're fine.
Fine with it.
Okay. You're qualified. 191. Here's what we're gonna do on question number 2. It seems like all of you know pretty much both of them. What we're gonna do is only say yes if you're really good friends with one or the other, or you've got a problem with one or the other. So do you have any yes answers? None at all? Okay. Jen, any questions?
No.
Jen? No. Qualified. Now this is unusual. I think you guys have been able to agree with me. Usually, there's lots of yes answers to lots of these questions. Like, nobody here knows any police officers. Nobody, but hear me out. Nobody here has any relatives that work for the United States government. All right, so I guess you're out there. We'll go through it. You got Jason. You get a lot of high numbers. 303. No, Jen?
Yeah.
Do you have any yes answers at all?
Yes.
What number?
4.
You know, Jen?
Yeah, I know that.
Anything besides that?
No.
No. Nobody in your life is in law enforcement. You haven't formed any opinions about the case ahead of time? You don't have any strong feelings about firearms?
No.
No? Or pickup truck? That was just a joke. All right, any questions, Ben? No. Jen? Once again, you're thrilled, Jen.
Yeah, exactly.
All right? You qualified. 244. Your name is sir? Brendan. Yeah, do you have any guess answers, Brendan? What number? Now, guys, listen. I mean besides 2 and 4. Right? No. You don't know Ben? But you do know Jen. How do you get along with Jen? Just fine? Any problem with Jen? Do you trust Jen? Do you think she tells the truth? Yeah. So would you find a believer over other people? Maybe. So there are circumstances under which you believe her because you know her. Not qualified. Remember, when you decide a case as a juror, you've got to decide the case based on, it's not a bad thing not to be qualified. You got to just be willing to decide the case on the evidence alone. The facts and the law, never on the relationships you have with one of the lawyers. Now, it's a little bit different here because you guys are classmates and you go to the same school, so you're going to know it's a little bit more difficult. Usually in court, if anybody even knew one of the lawyers, they'd be out. You can't really do that here because you'd all be out. Get off again. And, oh, did it die? Jake's telling me how to run my phone. Okay. Same one? Were you 114? I was 214. 114. Very good. Oh. 124? Your name's Joey? Quiet, please. Do you have any guess answers? 2 and 4. All right. Who do you know? You know both of them? You know one of them better than the other? Which one? Ben. Do you have any classes with Ben? You ever see him outside of school? Nope. All right. Do you think he's trustworthy? Would you take his word over that of Jen? You don't know? Pretty simple question. You got Ben and Jen. Do you believe one of them is more trustworthy than the other, or is it the same? It's the same? All right. Jen, any follow-up questions?
Do you trust me? Do you feel like since you know who Ben is, that you would trust him like more and then like feel a personal connection to him and that he's a boy and you're a boy and that romance. Like, you know, I'm probably gonna believe a girl more than I believe a boy just because we're in middle school and that's how it works. Do you feel that way?
You weren't supposed to feel that way. Joey says no, he doesn't feel that way. Any more questions? That's it. Ben. Ben's a man of few words. I think Joey's qualified. 104. 104.
Oh, you know what? Ours only went up to 103 today.
100. 100. Good job. Your name, sir?
Yawn.
John. John, do you have any yes answers to any questions?
Yes, 2 and 4.
All right. You know both of them or just one of them?
I know both of them.
Okay. Do you know one better than the other?
I know Ben more.
Okay. You hang out with Ben at all?
No,
Okay. Do you trust Ben?
I did.
Do you have any reason not to trust Jen?
No.
Pretty much the same?
Yeah.
What about Jen's bromance issue? Like, do you believe him? Do you believe one? Do you believe one gender more than the other more trustworthy? Just because you're
Trust both genders the same.
trust both genders the same. All right. Any questions, Ben? Okay, apparently people are comfortable with you. You're a jerk. 304. Besides knowing, I'm gonna have to do some shuffling now just to make this work. Besides knowing them, what are both of them? Any other yeses? No. I'm gonna have to skip you. Sorry. You can sit down. I got one. Okay. 83. I have 2 questions for you. What's your name? Chris. Why is everybody laughing? Chris, do you have any yes answers?
Yes.
Besides 2 and 4.
Yes.
What number?
8, 12, 15, 16, 18.
So it sounds like you know some people in law enforcement.
Yes.
Who?
My older brother.
Your older brother. Wow. What's your older brother do?
He's a prison guard, I believe.
Prison guard. Where does he work?
Fitchburg.
Fitchburg, Massachusetts?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does your brother live in your house?
No.
He's gone.
Yeah.
All right. How do you get along with your brother?
Pretty well.
Now your brother wears a uniform and a badge.
Yes.
You might hear some witnesses in this case who take the witness stand wearing a uniform and a badge. You understand that?
Yeah.
Question number 1 is, would you tend to favor someone, credit their testimony simply because they're in the same line of work as your brother?
No.
What about the idea that he's a sworn peace officer? Do you tend to give credibility and trust more to law enforcement officials more than other people?
No.
Do you give them less credibility and trust than you give to other people?
No.
All right. You said 8. What else did you say? 15?
8, 12, 15, 16, 18, and 21.
Okay, sounds like based on 12 and 15, you feel like you may have already formed an opinion about the case.
Yeah.
Tell me, what is the opinion?
When I answered the question, I think I had it on type and kind of forgot it.
Okay, so in other words, you thought you might have made up your mind about the case already, but now you've already forgotten?
Yeah.
So as you stand here today, not today, but right now, do you have an opinion about the case already?
No.
About guilt or innocence?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. But you think you did a couple minutes ago?
Yeah.
Which you've already forgotten?
Yeah.
All right. What do you got after 15?
16 and 21.
Okay. Again, these seem to go to bias and prejudice. Do you have any bias or prejudice? And remember, we're not talking about racial prejudice. No, none of us know what Anthony Harris's race is, right? Nobody knows we know his gender is probably male, right? That's all we know. Okay? Do you have any bias or prejudice that you think might affect your deliberations in the case?
Probably not.
Probably not?
Yeah.
That means maybe yes, right?
I guess.
Well, when you say probably not, that doesn't mean definitely not. So my question to you is, why might you have some bias or prejudice?
I don't know. Not really sure.
All right. I imagine counsel may have some follow-up questions for this juror. Ben?
Yes. So, if you thought that he definitely had, if you definitely had no bias against him, would you have said definitely not?
Yeah.
Good, Ben?
If when he you first like read the description of the case and you thought like maybe he could be guilty and you already had an opinion, but then it kind of went in one ear and out the other. How is it when you're like sitting and the evidence is being presented to you? How are you not going to forget it then?
Because sometimes I know when something's more important, I guess. Because if there's like, for example, if there's evidence like a handgun over me hearing the case like once, because I have a problem with remembering things. I'll probably remember a handgun over a case. You know what I'm trying to say?
So, do you not think that like who the case is about and the information about the case that you're answering the questions on, do you think that's not important?
No.
Let me ask you this. You'll be allowed to take notes during the case.
Okay.
Will that help you?
Yes.
Continue.
Do you take good notes? You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. I forgot your name. What's your name again?
Chris.
Chris. Now, Chris, even if you had what you thought was maybe a little bit of a bias one way or the other, if you were instructed by the judge, as you will be at the end of the case, on a couple of things. One is that that the prosecution, Jen, has to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, convince you. And that Ben doesn't have to convince you of anything. He has no burden of proof. He can sit and watch the entire trial if he wants. No obligation under our Constitution to do anything. The burden of proof rests with Jen. Can you follow those instructions and only convict if there's been proof beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes.
It sounded sure of yourself.
Yes, I am sure of myself.
Any more questions? Sorry, Jay. Go ahead, Ben.
If you were in the courtroom and you were on the jury deliberating the case, would you consider some pieces of evidence more important than other pieces of evidence?
No. I believe that all pieces of evidence have the same exact importance.
I'm going to say Chris qualified. All right. Juror number 36. All right. What's your name? Kate? Besides 2 or 4. Any yeses? All right. Now, you're wearing an Under Armour hoodie, right? There's going to be evidence in this case that Anthony Harris, or that somebody caught by a surveillance camera, okay, committing this robbery. The question will be whether it was Anthony Harris, but whoever was doing it was wearing a blue Under Armour hoodie. Would that cause you to have bias or prejudice one way or the other in this case? You could rule out the fact that you are obviously a lover of blue Under Armour hoodies? All right. Ben, any questions?
No.
Jen?
No.
And no other yes answers?
No.
You qualified. $147. $147. Hi. What's your name? Katie. So Katie. Katie, besides 2 and 4, do you have any yes answers? Yes. What number? 5. Number 5. So you have somebody you know employed by the U.S. government?
Well, my dad's a lawyer. He's working for it.
Your dad's a lawyer. All right. What's your dad's name? John. What kind of law does John do? Real estate law. Okay. Now, there's 2 lawyers up here. The judge is a lawyer. Do you have any strong feelings about lawyers one way or the other in terms of favorable, unfavorable, trust, mistrust, anything? No. But your dad's a lawyer. You trust your dad? You love your dad? Wouldn't that naturally make you probably believe what lawyers say instead of what witnesses say? You doesn't talk much about work? And it doesn't sound like he probably does a lot of courtroom work, right? He does real estate land use work. Okay. All right. You can be objective about the lawyers in this case? You know what I mean by objective? By objective, I mean fair to both sides. Can you do that? Are there any other yes answers? No. Jen, any questions for Katie?
No.
No. You're kind of grinning. Why? You okay with it?
Yeah?
Yeah. You want to run the jury?
Yeah. I don't really know.
Okay.
I think she knows Ben too, so.
Ben, any questions? for
Yeah.
Katie?
If you had to decide, if somebody told you you had to decide if the guy was innocent or guilty in 5 seconds right now, would you say he was innocent or guilty?
What did you say, Katie? Any more questions? That's the perfect answer, Katie. You're in the jury. $99. Juror number 99. Anybody? All right. So, number 7. 7? What's your name? Riley? Riley? Besides 2 and 4, are there any yes answers on your, what is it? 18. Very good. Ms. Burnett, how are we doing on time?
I don't know, what time is it?
It is.
Oh, it's quarter after, we have 15 minutes, I just want to leave a little time for them to ask
Question?
questions.
Yeah. We'll get it. It was 18? Oh, are you related to any law enforcement agents? Okay. That was question 18.
I know one.
You know one. That's good. Okay, the one you know. Where does he or she work?
I believe he works in the police force.
Police force. Do you know what town?
Not certain. I think he works in Massachusetts.
Okay, so a Massachusetts police officer. Now, who is this person to you? A friend?
He's just an acquaintance.
An acquaintance? Okay. When was the last time you saw him? It's a him?
Yeah, I think maybe a couple months ago.
A couple months ago? All right. What were the circumstances? Was it social? Was it professional?
Social.
Were you being arrested? Social? Friend of your parents?
Friend of my parents and one of their friends.
Okay. Was your interaction with this person positive? Okay. Would your interaction with this person or your relationship with this acquaintance cause you to have favoritism for or against the police in a case like this? No. What about credibility? Would your relationship with this person cause you to believe a police officer more or less than some other person? All right. Ben, any questions?
No.
Jen?
Nope.
All right. I believe you are juror number 12. All right. That is generally the bulk of a jury selection. What would happen in a real trial, we don't have enough time to do it here. What would happen in a real trial, believe it or not, we would pick about 12 more. So there's a large number, and then Jen and Ben would be allowed, for any reason they want, just to knock some off and get it down to 12. Those are what we call peremptory challenges. We pick more than 12, and then Jen and Ben can take turns knocking one off at a time until it gets down to 12. All right? That's how the real process works. That would take a little bit too long today for us to do, so we're not going to do that today. But that is how jury selection works. Generally, in an adult jury selection, there's a lot more yes answers, and almost none of them are about knowing the lawyer. Just not very, doesn't happen very often, all right? Now, I think what's a good idea now, if you want to do this, we have till 2 o'clock?
Yes.
I'd like to give you an opportunity to ask me questions, all right? The way we'll do it, do you have any special way you want to do it?
Well, there's one question I want to start with. Has a really important question that pertains to 12A agreement and a concept we were going over, and we were hoping to.
Sure, where's Cam?
Where's Cam? Stand up here. Cam's right here.
Cam? Quiet, please. Cam, what's your question?
Now, if justice wasn't blind, then how come the jury is not viewed on the bench?
All right. Cam's question is, if justice is supposed to be blind, why is the jury allowed to, you said view upon, like see the defendant?
Yes.
All right. Well, it's a good question. The idea, though, you sit down. The idea that justice is blind it's really a metaphor. It's not a literal statement. It doesn't mean that justice is actually blind and can't see the evidence or the defendant or anything else. What justice is blind is meant to suggest is that it doesn't play favorites. In other words, by being blind, the judge or jury wouldn't be able to play favorites by seeing one side or the other and being overly familiar with one side or the other. But actually, seeing the defendant is not, it doesn't make justice any more or less blind. The word blind is not meant to suggest visual blindness in that metaphor. It's meant to suggest fairness and impartiality. It's blind in the sense that it won't play favorites. You follow what I'm saying? Oh, it's a great question. Okay. Now I see what you're saying. Kim is saying, well, what he really means is, what if a jury, right, was racially prejudiced? They could see the defendant and draw some kind of negative inference or prejudicial inference based on the race of the defendant, right? Well, we do have a system to prevent that, okay? It would be unlawful for any juror to sit on a jury if that juror had a racial prejudice that would in some way affect that juror's deliberations, okay? Now the question becomes, well, how do you find out, right? What if the juror was trying to hide it, right? The jurors are allowed to see the defendant in all the parties, but this questioning, okay, is meant to screen out some prejudice, and also there's law regulating the lawyers. If the lawyers were trying to knock off jurors and trying to keep jurors who were prejudiced, then they would be disciplined and there would be sanctions imposed on them. All right? The bottom line is the system is designed in choosing jurors and regulating the conduct of the lawyers to prevent racial prejudice. All right? No system is perfect. All right? But the system is designed to make it as blind as possible so that only tolerant, fair-minded, non-prejudicial, non-racist jurors will be allowed to sit on the jury. And therefore, we strive for that blind justice. Blind in the sense you meant. I didn't give you enough credit, Cam. You understood the metaphor a lot better than I thought you did. That's exactly what it's meant to suggest. Yep. Do I just...
Yeah, just make it random.
Go.
Why do you want to become a judge?
You know, I didn't want to become a judge until I was offered the job. I never thought about being a judge ahead of time. I was a trial lawyer. And, but I did want to be a judge eventually because when they offered it, I said yes. I guess I wanted it because it seemed like two things, I think. There's this sort of, there's the nice, noble reason, and then there's kind of the realistic reason. It's not realistic, but more selfish reason. The nice, noble reason was that, and I mean this sincerely, it seemed like a good way to do public service, to serve the public, do something socially worthwhile in an area where I knew what I was doing. I mean, I knew courtrooms, I knew trials because I had been a jury trial lawyer, you know, like Ben and Jenny here, my whole adult life. So it seemed like a good way to do an important function and serve the public. Now, why did I also, you know, when you're a trial lawyer in court, it's like a lot of other things. You probably feel this way about teachers sometimes, about your parents, about coaches, about anybody. You kind of think, if I was doing that, I'd do it different, right? I do it better or I do it different. But geez, I'd like to be able to, coach this team or run this class or run this household like my parents did, and I'd do it different. It's natural for a trial lawyer to think, if I was a judge, I'd do it different than that. And that's a little bit of it too. Like, it was a chance to sort of run a courtroom the way I always thought it should be run, to be honest. It's also an intellectually stimulating job. A lot of the job doesn't involve being on the bench in a courtroom and making decisions. A lot of it involves research and study about how the law applies to different facts, making decisions about the law and how the law applies to different cases, not jury type questions. So it's pretty intellectually stimulating and challenging work here. Yep. Somebody back here, their hand up. Yeah. And I'll come all the way over.
What is it like to be a judge?
It's generally pretty satisfying. Okay. It's one of those. It is a job where a lot of people around you spend a lot of time sort of catering to what you need and trying to make you look good and giving you what you need, because everything in the courtroom sort of revolves around you. Everybody wants you to be able to see everything great, hear everything great, have the tools you need, whether it's computers or law research or information to do the job well. So you kind of cater to a little bit. That part of it's satisfying. The other satisfying part is the part I was saying just a minute ago about researching the law and learning how the law applies in different situations. It's also pretty satisfying seeing justice done by jurors all the time, by weighing the evidence and coming up with a just verdict, because juries generally get it right. The negative part, the less satisfying part, is what I was doing today immediately before I came here. I had to impose a criminal sentence on someone. Someone had been convicted of a crime. This was actually, believe it or not, this was a crime. There's a gun shop in Plastow, I think it's called State Line or something. This was a person who had bought 13 handguns for a criminal who lived in Lawrence. This person didn't have a criminal record. He was allowed to buy guns legally. He bought them for a criminal, a felon who lived in Lawrence, and sold him the gun. That's a crime. At a gun shop in Plastow, believe it or not. Just a coincidence I happen to be coming here today. And this person, though, ended up committing this crime for a lot of reasons. Some of them his own fault, some of them difficult circumstances in his life. Sending a person to prison is never fun, even when they deserve it. And they do deserve it. It's never fun, though. And that's one of the parts of the job that's challenging and pretty unpleasant, because it's never a joyful occasion to send someone away to prison with their family sitting there and everyone's so disappointed in how this person made bad choices, decisions, and in many ways either ruined their lives or the lives of somebody else. In the middle. Yeah.
What's the most interesting case you've been through?
I've been, hundreds of interesting cases of all types, civil and criminal. Every conceivable type of case involving, deals gone bad, serious crimes, horse breeding, everything from horse breeding to bridge building, to gun dealing, unlawful gun dealing. There's just so many types of crimes. I couldn't even begin to pick one as the most interesting. I don't want to say they're all interesting, because they're not. There's some that aren't, but most of them are, and they're all so different it would take me forever to tell you about even 2 or 3 of them. Yep.
How long did the trial tend to last?
Great question. How long does a trial tend to last? I've been in trials, both as the judge and as one of the lawyers, that took half a day. I've been in trials as a judge and as one of the lawyers that took 6 weeks. Some trials go on for over a year. Not generally too many in our courts in New Hampshire, but they happen. There's really no minimum or maximum length. Excuse me. Thank you. So the bottom line is, trials can be of any length. Most trials, though, the huge majority, take 2 to 4 days. 2 to 4 days.
Joe?
Yes.
We actually have to stop.
Time to go.